So good morning. I'm Leanne Potter. I direct the office of, it's a new one. We used to be the educational outreach team, and recently we are focused on innovation, and we are also focused on engagement. So when I was saying earlier, I really was hoping you would ask some questions. I really mean that. I hope that you will. So welcome. Today you are here for a program focused on this book, Little Man, Little Man, A Story of Childhood, and our program today is really focusing on the legacy of James Baldwin. First, I want to do some welcomes. I want to welcome students and teachers, first from Ron Brown College Prep High School. Thank you guys for being here. As well as students from Theodore Roosevelt Senior High School here in the district. Thank you guys for being here. And of course, our special guests, and I will do formal introductions of them in a little while. Aisha Karefa-Smart, Nicholas Boggs, and Jason Reynolds are all here to participate in our conversation. And I also want to acknowledge a few other people. But first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to advance my slides. I made the mistake of not doing that. So here you go. Welcome, students. Welcome, special guests. All right, and I also want to acknowledge a few things. Everybody here, all you students today, you're going to get books to take home with you, and that's pretty exciting. And the reason you're getting those books is thanks to an Open Book Foundation. Of course, make it easy. Thank you. An Open Book Foundation. And your school libraries are also going to receive books from the Daniel P. Murray Association here within the library. And I know some of my colleagues from that association are here in the room, so thank you. Generosity is a really good thing, so thank you. The library appreciates that. I also want to thank Wanda Cutright from our special events office. Thank you. I want to thank all of my colleagues from multimedia. You'll notice the cameras and the bright lights because we are recording this so that you can all watch it again later on YouTube. I also want to thank Uhuru Fleming, wherever she is, because she made sure that our guests got here today. I want to thank Sasha and Kalina, so Sasha Dowdy and Kalina Black, wherever they are. They helped do some research to pull together some of the clips that I'm going to show you in a minute. And most importantly, Monica Valentine is hiding behind the pillar, but we're going to shout out to Monica. So Monica proposed and spearheaded today's program. She participated in a program this past December that was sponsored by the Children's Book Guild of Washington, D.C., and she was inspired. And anytime somebody is inspired, you know that what's going to come out of that inspiration is a good thing. So shout out to Monica. There are two women from the Guild here this morning, and this is where I get all goosebumpy because I love connections like this. Barbara Ann Port, as well as Guild President Rhoda Truboff, are here. Both Barbara and Rhoda have interesting connection to our program. When Little Man was first published in the 1970s, Barbara was the woman who wrote the review for Newsday. How cool is that? You never know. You got to think about that. Those assignments you're given today, 40 some odd years from now, somebody might quote them, so just brace yourself. So in her review, which I got to read, thanks to Monica, she asked a question. She asked the question, so who's going to read this book? This book, the only book that James Baldwin wrote specifically for a younger audience. And she responded to it in a bunch of different ways. She said, children maybe, adults maybe, fans of Baldwin maybe. But then she ended and she said, how about anyone maybe who knows what counts about a book is what it's saying to you when you read it. And I love that. So I am just so tickled that you're here today. It's just so great. And I'll tell you something about Rhoda in a little bit, but not now. So on with your program. So today we are focusing on this book. Little Man was originally published in 1976, and it was recently republished. And not only did James Baldwin write it, but Joran Kozak helped write and produce that original book. I asked a few of you earlier how much you knew about James Baldwin, and I sort of got some mixed answers. So I thought I'd spend a little bit of time this morning telling you about who James Baldwin was. James Baldwin was born in 1924. He passed away in 1987, and he was once described, and I hope you guys like this. I really want you to hear this because it's so good. Think about how you want somebody to describe you. Somebody once described James Baldwin as an articulate, passionate, and clear communicator to the American conscience. That's really good. In a minute, you're going to hear other people introduce him, and I really hope you listen to how they describe him. Here at the Library of Congress, you can learn a lot about James Baldwin. You can, let me ask you this. So if I told you that the Library of Congress is the largest library in the world, and that we hold collections in more than 470 different languages, in a huge variety of formats that include maps and photographs and motion picture film and sound recordings and manuscript collections and sheet music and architectural drawings, and we even have books here at the library. What sorts of materials do you think we might have related to James Baldwin? So tell me, what do you think what have we got? You could cheat. What do you think? Thank you. What do you think? Yeah, we do. We absolutely have sound recordings. Yeah. Yeah, we could probably find some sheet music that has some relevance, certainly. Yeah, and photographs and motion picture film. And so, yes, we do. There are photographs of James Baldwin here at the library. There are photographs taken of him. The earliest one that I could find was from 1955 when he was in his 30s. But we also have photographs of people that mattered to him. We have a photograph of his middle school French teacher. And if you ever read any biographical information about him and you find out which of his teachers had an impact on his life, he talks about this middle school French teacher. So it's so cool that we have a photograph of this guy. We also have photographs of James Baldwin involved in events that we know about. He was at the March on Washington in 1963, and we have photographs of it. There are also blog posts and books by him, and there are books about him. In fact, if you look real closely at the screen here, I did a search in the library's catalog on James Baldwin, and can you see how many hits came up? 1,263. Not everybody in the world can you do a search in the Library of Congress catalog and get 1,200 titles that pop up. Some of them were written by him, some of them were written about him, some of them are in English, some of them are in multiple different languages. The blog posts are available on the library's website if you just do a quick search on James Baldwin. There are also sound recordings and motion picture film. And I've got 3 clips I wanted to share with you today. The first one takes place here at the library. If you've been to the library before and you've been in our Coolidge Auditorium, it's a really big theater that's in this building, just downstairs. James Baldwin was here in 1986, and he did a talk. And a woman named Gwendolyn Brooks introduced him. Do you guys know who Gwendolyn Brooks was? The first African-American to win a Pulitzer Prize for poetry. Sort of a big deal. Anyway, she introduces him, and I thought, wow, this would be really fun. Instead of me telling you about him, let Gwendolyn Brooks tell you about him. Let me think about how I can best do this. Are we good with sound? Cool.
You know the phrase larger than life. If that phrase is valid at all, it likes James Baldwin. This man has dared to confront and examine himself, ourselves, and the enigmas between. Many have been called prophets, but here is a bona fide prophet. Long ago, he guaranteed the fire next time. No more water, the fire next time. Virtually the following day, we, smelling smoke, looked out and found ourselves surrounded by leering, singing fire. I wonder how many others have regarded this connection. And no, James Baldwin did not start the fire. He foretold its coming. He was a pre-reporter. He was a prophet.
Pretty good introduction. James Baldwin also, in 1986, spoke at the National Press Club here in Washington, and there's a whole recording of his entire luncheon speech that included some questions and answers. And one of the questions he was asked has everything to do with young people, and so I'm just going to have you listen to that one question and his response to it.
Excuse me. What contemporary topic or topics interest you the most these days?
I think I'm really going to be obsessed with the future of the young, because we, the elders, are responsible for that. And I myself, I think, I learn a lot from young people, because young people are unlike people my age. In the generality, I was on the road really, to find out if it was true what people were telling me, that the youth of America had become hopelessly apathetic and middle-aged and dead. There are a great many things in the people I met, and I've been on the road for a year, but none of those things. The truth, I think, is that their elders have betrayed them by throwing Jaguars at them and TV sets and other kind of paraphernalia, instead of trying to teach them, instead of trying to raise them, instead of loving them. And they've been abandoned to the dream of safety. And children, unlike their elders, are not very easily fooled. That's what fascinates me today.
Love that. Not easily fooled. Isn't that true? And finally, one of the other recordings that is available through the library is an interview that he did in 1963, shortly after having had a meeting with then Attorney General Robert Kennedy. And the interview goes on for quite some time. I'm just going to have you watch a little segment of it. And this one's available through this, it's the American Archive of Public Broadcasting, so you guys can watch the whole thing, if you're really interested.
Said only to themselves.
This is the interviewer.
Probably one of the most articulate, passionate, and clear communicators to the American conscience is my guest, James Baldwin. James Baldwin's name is known throughout America for saying so passionately, so clearly, and with such grace and style what every Negro has long known and has long felt. Welcome, James. It's good to have this opportunity to talk with you and to have you share with us some of your present feelings about our country, America. But before we get into the issues of the day, I'd like to know a little more about you. I've read practically everything that you have written, but I still would like to know something about you, the young man growing up in Harlem, what schools you went to, maybe a little about some of the teachers that you might have come in contact with in Harlem.
What a funny question. My mind is someplace else, really. But to think back on it, I was born in Harlem Hospital, and we grew up, first house I remember was on Park Avenue, which is not the American Park Avenue, or maybe it is the American Park Avenue.
Uptown Park Avenue.
Uptown Park Avenue, where the railroad tracks are. And we used to play on the roof and in the, I can't call it an alley, but near the river. It was a kind of dump, garbage dump. And those were the first scenes I remember. I remember my father had trouble keeping us alive. There were 9 of us. And I was the oldest, so I took care of the kids. and dealt with Daddy, whom I understand much better now. Part of his problem was he couldn't feed his kids. But I was a kid and I didn't know that. And he was very religious, very rigid. He kept us together, I must say. And when I look back on it, after all, it was nearly 40 years ago that I was born, I think back on my growing up and walk that same block today because it's still there. And think of the kids on that block now. I'm aware that something terrible has happened, which is very hard to describe. I am in all but technical legal fact a Southerner. My father was born in the South. No, my mother was born in the South. And if they had waited 2 more seconds, I might have been born in the South. But that means that I was raised by a family whose roots were essentially rural and
Southern rural.
And whose relationship to the church was very direct because it was the only means they had of expressing their pain and their despair. But 20 years later, the moral authority which was present in the Negro Northern community when I was growing up has vanished. And people talk about progress, and I look at Harlem, which I really know. I know it like I know my hand. And it is much worse there today than it was when I was growing up.
Would you say this is true of the schools, too?
It's much worse in the schools.
What school did you go to?
I went to PS 24, went to PS 139.
We are fellow alumni. I went to 139.
And I didn't like a lot of my teachers, but I had a couple of teachers who were very nice to me. One was a Negro teacher. And I remember, you asked me these questions, so I'm trying to answer you. I remember coming home from school, and you can guess how young I must have been. And my mother asked me if my teacher was colored or white. And I said she was a little bit colored, a little bit white, because she was about your color. And as a matter of fact, I was right. That's part of the dilemma of being an American Negro, that one is a little bit colored and a little bit white. And not only in physical terms, but in the head and in the heart. And there are days, this is one of them, when you wonder what your role is in this country and what your future is in it. How precisely you're going to reconcile.
Hate to do that because the whole interview is great, but I really want to encourage you to watch it. So with that, we're going to change gears, and I get to officially welcome to the stage this time our special guests. Aisha Karefa-Smart is not only an author, she is not only a public speaker, but I can introduce her as an inspiration. Truly, because she is James Baldwin's niece, and she is one of the inspirations that he took and motivated himself to write Little Man, Little Man. So please come on up. Love that. Also, I want to introduce Nicholas Boggs. Nicholas is the co-editor of the newly republished Little Man, Little Man. He is a professor of English at New York University. He is a Baldwin scholar, and he is a former student of the Washington, D.C. Book Guild president, Rhoda Truboff. Love that.
Hey, everybody.
And finally, Jason Reynolds. Almost needs no introduction. I have a hunch you guys know Jason Reynolds. Jason is an author. He writes novels and poetry for young adult and middle grade audiences. He wrote Ghost, a National Book Award finalist for young people's literature. He was born here in D.C. and raised in neighboring Maryland and is a dear friend to the library. And you guys are going to get such a kick out of this because Jason is going to do some reading and then he's going to have a conversation. Come on up.
Actually, me and Aisha both are going to do a short. What's happening? Y'all good? Everybody all right?
You're supposed to show me how to get up on stage. I came this way.
I came this way. We just all these different ways.
You stepped up like a G. I look
Right,
like
exactly.
Good to see everybody. Good to see y'all. Hope everybody's all right. Roosevelt was happening. Ron Brown was happening. Y'all all right? I know y'all like, this is better than school. Y'all should like buck up. This is better than school.
Right.
Here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna read a short excerpt of the book so y'all can get a glimpse of the story. Aisha's gonna read a short excerpt of the book so y'all can get even better sense of the voice. And then we'll open it up to discussion and then we'll open it up to y'all. Simple enough, all right? All right. So just to give you some context about my excerpt, I'm reading the part. So there's this kid named TJ. He is the protagonist. He's the main character. He's outside. This is Harlem. He's on the block. He's playing. He's bouncing his ball, right? And I remember being a kid. You had like the bouncy ball. You like bounce it as hard as you. I don't know if y'all still had that when y'all were growing up. You get the bouncy ball out the grocery store, like gumball machine, and you bounce it. But he has like a basketball or like some kind of ball. He's bouncing it too high, and every time it comes down, he basically is trying to catch it, but he's tripping and he's falling down, right? Or the ball is knocking him down. So that's the context. Here we go. TJ don't bounce the ball this time. He a little afraid to have to try to catch it again now that Blinky and WT on this side of the street. And this hurt behind do hurt him. It hurt him more and more, but he act like it ain't nothing. Man, we saw you fall down 2 times. That's why we come on over here. I'm supposed to watch out for you. You know that. You ain't got to watch out for me, TJ said. And he bounced his ball on the sidewalk, but not hard this time, just enough to catch it in his hand. But he happy really that WT standing there looking at him with that grown-up frown. TJ ain't got no brothers, and WT like a brother for him. He do look out for TJ, that's true. And TJ bounced the ball a little bit again. TJ asked WT, you see me catch it before? I saw you fall on your ass, WT say. That WT all over. Ask him a simple question and he got to be smart. Sometimes TJ wish he had another friend, somebody who wouldn't all the time be being smart with him. But he the smallest boy on the block. Ain't but WT be bothered with him. TJ doubt even Blinky be bothered with him if she wasn't all the time running after WT. WT younger than the other boys, true, but soon he be getting big. He pretty big already for his age. Then maybe he won't bother with TJ no more neither. So
how many of you have heard a children's book written in that type of language?
Very few.
Never, right? You have? What other children's book? Third grade elementary. So that's Black English, otherwise known as Ebonics. Most of us in here speak it. My uncle wrote that book for my younger brother, TJ, when my brother said, Uncle Jimmy, when you gonna write a book about me? And so my uncle wrote the book for him, and he wrote it in the language of how we speak, you know, when we hanging out and when, you know, we're in the streets and stuff like that, and we're talking with our friends, because he didn't want to write it in a language that, he wanted to write it in a language that was recognizable to us. And now that language is called AAVE, which is African American Vernacular English. So it is a language. My uncle wrote an essay called If Black English Isn't a Language, Then Tell Me What Is. So he felt that it was important to validate the way we speak when we're amongst each other. That it is a language that is valid and that you should be able to speak that way amongst each other because our people, that was the language that kept us through slavery and kept us through Jim Crow and the Civil Rights Movement. It was a code that we had amongst each other when we communicated that other people didn't necessarily understand. So that's why the book is written in that form, and it's a very unusual form, and most people are not used to hearing a children's book written in that way. So this is Blinky. This is my character. This is the character that I inspired. In the book, she's not TJ's sister, she's his friend, but it's inspired by my role, which was his older sister, which was to always go and find him because he was in some kind of trouble or about to get into some kind of trouble. So my mother was always like, Aisha, go find TJ. So anyway, I'm gonna read a little bit from Blinky. So that's Blinky, and but Blinky, she just looking from across the street Them eyeglasses blinking just like the sun was hitting you in the eye. TJ don't know why she all the time got them glasses on. She say she can't see without them. Maybe that's true if she say so, but TJ put them on one time and he couldn't see nothing with them on. He couldn't see across the street. Everything looked like it was rained on. So TJ ain't too sure about Blinky. It was some white folks at school got her them glasses. If he can't see out of them, how's she gonna see out of them? And she older than he is. She 8 years old. She ought know better, but she a girl.
Here's the thing, man. I have some questions, a few questions for the both of you. Before I ask my first question, I want to make sure give you a little more context about Baldwin's importance, not just on writers, but also on everything in our culture. James Baldwin was one of the most important American minds to ever live. No matter what color you are, where you're from, he's one of the smartest and most intelligent people to ever walk the face of the earth. If there was no James Baldwin, then there is no Tupac. If there was no James Baldwin, then there is no Ta-Nehisi Coates. If there was no James Baldwin, there is no J. Cole. If there was no, we could go down the list of people who are very important to our culture, whether it be the hip-hop culture, black culture, American culture. If there is no James Baldwin, we are very different people in terms of the way that we think about the country that we live in, all right? So I want to, and it bleeds into everything that we do, his thought process. As a writer, for myself, before I ask my question, my mentor was a man named Walter Dean Myers. Walter Dean Myers' mentor, and the only man that he really respected in terms of writing, was James Baldwin, who he felt like gave him permission to write like this, because Walter was around when this book was published, and he had never seen a children's book written in this kind of language, right? And it gave him the permission to say, yo, we could be, and he's from Harlem, and he said, we could be who we are on the page and do it this way. And when I discovered Walter as an early 20-something, it did the same thing for me, right? So that's sort of his influence on me. A famous quote was, the interior lives are the real lives, meaning who you are on the inside is a real thing, and that the intangible dreams of the world has a tangible effect on the world, right? Which means that whatever you thinking on the inside, all the stuff they tell you too silly, too stupid, too far-fetched, is actually what will eventually change the world in which we live. That's from Baldwin. So my question is that, first of all, I really want to know, what was it like, first of all, you're his niece, and TJ is his nephew, from a personal level, from a human level, because we can intellectualize with them all day, but I want to know, what was it like when, not only having him as an uncle, but also when this book was published and seeing sort of familiar faces and familiar behavior in this book?
It was surreal. Like, it was like a dream, because we knew that our uncle was very, very busy. He spent most of his time traveling all over the world, speaking, writing, his activist work. He was a witness, so he showed up, because one of the things he was accused of was when he went to Paris and he took up residence in Saint-Paul-de-Vence, which is a small village outside of Nice, in the south of France, of abandoning the civil rights movement. So he took that to heart. And so he made sure that he showed up everywhere to bear witness. So we were always like seeing him on television. Uncle Jimmy's on TV, or Uncle Jimmy's gonna be on TV tonight, or he's speaking here, he's speaking there. And so when my brother said to him, at one of his visits back home, because I grew up in a building that he purchased for my grandmother. And so we all grew up in the same building, and it was a second home for him. And my little brother, TJ, said, he would always say to him whenever Uncle Jimmy came home, Uncle Jimmy, when you gonna write a book about me? And so, the fact that one Thanksgiving, I think we were all together in my grandmother's apartment, all the family, because I come from a large extended family. He was one of 9. So just imagine, I have, 5 aunts, 4 uncles, and all of those offspring. So it was a bunch of us, and a box came from, at the time, Dial Press published the book, and we opened the box up. It was a surprise. He surprised us. And we opened the box up and pulled out the book, and we were just like, what? We just opened the book and just looked at the characters and saw TJ had his own story with his actual name, and it was just surreal. I mean, we just were, we kind of bugged out a bit, because it was just like, it's a book. It's actually a book about TJ, about his antics, about his life, running up and down the streets in New York. And It was surreal. Yeah.
Can you talk, just and I'm going to come to you next, Mr. Boggs, can you talk a bit about, we celebrate Baldwin's, his life, but his life for the most part post-death is a life of victory, right? We sort of have created the, you know, right, this sort of immortal figure of this victorious man. Can you talk about a little bit about what this book did in terms of, like, was it a successful project? Because which is fascinating to me, because most of us had never known Baldwin to write any children's books.
Right. Well, it says one and only. What you have to understand, you're an artist. So the impetus behind writing this book, and meaning his purpose, his drive, was the request of his nephew. He wasn't thinking about New York Times critics. He wasn't thinking about what the publishing world was going to say. He said, my nephew asked me to write a book about him.
That's power, by the way.
And that's all she wrote. So that was the type of human he was. Okay, he bore witness on behalf of Black folks and our lives, our interior lives, what we felt like experiencing racism, and much of what he did and much of his sacrifice was for us. He didn't have any of his own children. He considered us his children. And when he wrote and when he spoke, he always referenced, I'm doing this for my nieces and nephews so that they will have a chance and they will have a different life than I had. And he often, letter to my nephew, then you have this, then you have, all these references to his nieces and nephews in his speeches when he is chastising white America for their treatment of Black people. And he's like, I have to protect and, and bear witness and stand in the gap for the future generation. So it was serious to him. So when my brother asked him to write this book at like 4 years old, 5 years old, he thought that was an important request. And so he didn't care that it was not acknowledged or it was said to be a difficult book to market or place. He made a promise and he kept that promise to his nephew, and 40 years later, here it is. So that's the importance of documenting things and writing things, because you may not be around, but that thing may show up, and that book might show up, that journal might show up, that poem might show up and inspire people beyond your wildest dreams. And that's what this book is doing now.
It's amazing. It's also such an important lesson in integrity.
Yes.
I know we are chasing the bag.
Yeah, but integrity is important.
Integrity is very important.
It's very important, and it stands the test of time. The bag doesn't always stand the test of time.
It never does. Now, Nicholas,
you can spend a bag, right?
Exactly. Nicholas, for you, my question is, how? How did you come to this project? I'm always fascinated by it. Any time that there are other people involved. I mean, this is a family thing. That was a family thing. It went out of print. How do you come to this beautiful piece of work?
Great question, and it's an honor to be here with you and with Aisha. Thank you to the Library of Congress. Thank you, Monica. And thank you to especially the students, because actually the first time that I came into contact with Baldwin was as a student in the DC Public Schools at Alice Deal Junior High School. There was a picture of him, a drawn picture of him that my teacher had put up along with many other authors, and I read his work in high school. And junior high school, and then to connect us to the importance of libraries, it was in college at the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library that I came upon in 1996, so 20 years after this was published. I was taking a class on Baldwin. My teacher told me there was a children's book. I went to the library. I found a first edition of the book, which this is the Library of Congress's first edition. And right away, I was already a huge Baldwin fan, and I thought, this is a really special book. Why is it out of print? And I did some detective work. You could see this illustrator as a French artist, and I read Baldwin's biography, and there was one paragraph about him. That's it. So I emailed. If you won't believe this, but email was new. We were just starting to email in 1996. I sent an email to the biographer, and I said, do you know anything about Joran Kazak? He wrote back, he said, I think he's dead, I don't know him. 5 years later, I'm living in New York City. I sent an email out to a bunch of art historians in Paris saying, do you know anything about Yoran Kazak? Nobody answers, but I leave my phone number. I'm sitting in my apartment 6 months later, the phone rings, and it's a raspy, French accented voice of an old man saying, I am Yoran Kazak, I'm alive, I hear you're looking for me, come to Paris, I'm having an exhibition. I was completely broke, I had no money, I was in grad school. I got my third credit card and I booked a plane ticket to France. And it's a long story from there, but it's been really such a privilege over the last 15 years to work with the Yoran Kazak's family, to work with Aisha and her brother Tijan, who wrote these wonderful forward and afterward. And one of the biggest pleasures, I would say, bringing it back into print is sharing it with students. We love to do that. And also just to hear Aisha and now Jason read aloud from this book. This book is meant to be read aloud. So I hope you guys will do that with your copies, in class or at home or when you're out bouncing the ball, wherever you are. But this book is meant to be read out loud. And it wouldn't have been, I don't think, if we hadn't brought it back.
Now, you were a co-editor on the project. Can you and I mean, we take that sort of term, I guess, as an editor for granted. But can you give us a little context about what it means to edit a book, and furthermore, what it means to edit a book that already exists? Did you have to make tough decisions? Was there anything you had to change? I noticed that the musicality of the book is there are no books today that would allow for that kind of musicality, the repetition, the narrator's voice being the voice of a child, right? All of those things are very hard to find in today's young literature, specifically illustrated young literature, right? This is a weird in-between kind of book. So were they hard decisions? Like, how does that work?
I'm sure Aisha can say some things about this too, but from my perspective, I just wanted this book out in the world. So about 10 or 12 years ago, I presented it to a bunch of big publishers, like trade publishers they're called, right, who publish the bestsellers and stuff like that, and they were super interested in it originally, but then they took a closer look at it, and it's precisely what you were saying. It's sort of a children's book for adults and an adult's book for children, and also the language. They were concerned about the language, which I thought was so ironic, given that amazing essay that Aisha referenced, if Black English isn't a language, then tell me what is. So for a while, we couldn't get it republished. And then about 5 years ago, a university press, which is a different kind of a press. These are presses that are based in universities, and they sometimes are less concerned about the bottom line, right, about sales, even though this has now sold 15,000 copies. Nice. But they did it, and they did a beautiful job. It was very important to myself and my co-editor that Aisha and Tijan write the afterword and the forward. How often do you have the chance for the childhood characters in the book to come back and write an afterword and a forward? So that was super important, and I think having it with the university press helped. We also wanted to keep it as close to the original as possible, right, in terms of production value, in terms of how it looked and felt, and needed to be a hardcover. But they wanted to update. You don't know from the old edition, because it's so old, how the original colors are supposed to be, right? They're kind of muted. So we needed to work carefully with the book designer to update and sort of make the colors as vibrant as they were originally intended.
Is the illustrator, Mr. Kazak, is he still alive?
Unfortunately, no. He died 2 years after I went to Paris, but his son, who was Baldwin's godson, is still alive and came to New York. We had a launch event at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, and he was there for that.
Aisha, if there's one thing, because I know we try not to spoil the book or we try not to give things away, but this is such an interesting book. If there's one thing you took from the book, you particularly, right? So that way you all can still make your own assessments, but you personally, being close to the story, but then also reading it as a story, what do you take from the work?
Well, what the work did is it gave a magical tone to the life and the childhood of an urban Black boy. You know how they talk about Black boy joy? Mm-hmm. That was important because so many of our stories are framed in despair or some sort of coming out straight out the hood and overcoming, It was TJ being a kid, being joyful. He's in the city, so he sees certain things, broken bottles, drugs, somebody shooting up. This is why the book was difficult to market, because the subject matter my uncle kept it real. He kept it very, he kept it 100 with his, his depiction of TJ growing up in the city, that was important to me because you don't get to see that kind of whimsical, like I'm having fun, I'm chilling with my friends, I'm doing all these different things. We're seeing some stuff over here. We're seeing the cops chase down somebody here. We're seeing somebody get arrested, but we just looking and we still, bouncing that ball. We still having fun. We still doing what we do as black children. We're gonna, I don't know, y'all may be too young, but there was a game called Skellies where you melt the crayon in the bottle top and then and all these games that you made up, red light, green light, you playing double dutch, you doing all the different things on the block, it is what it is. No matter what's going around you as a child growing up in the city, no matter what you see, you still a kid and you still have fun and to me that's what I took from this, that it was like the enduring nature of black children to, in spite of what's going on in their environment, to still be able to have fun and create games and create joy. Yeah.
And what about you, Nicholas? Like you read it 1,000,000 times over, right? Because we come from different spaces, we are different people, right? Or did you glean from different from the text?
Honestly, for me, hearing folks read it out loud is what changes its meaning for me. So Aisha reading from it, Tijan, you, I was in New York, Spike Lee's sister, Joie Lee, read from it, and there's a character named Miss Lee, and of course she's Miss Lee, so it was perfect. But hearing her read out loud, I know that character is an older woman who is an alcoholic, right? So it's an example of this kind of complicated representation that the book gives us. And I always had a little bit of a problem just with that one. It seemed a little bit like a stereotype. It was the only character. But then when I heard Joie Lee read from it out loud, the character came to life in a different way. And so for me, I think at this juncture, that's what's special about it, is hearing what it means to you guys, what it means to new readers. That's the whole reason that Baldwin wrote it. It's the whole reason we brought it back into print. It belongs to all of you. And that's the real joy at this point for me.
Just to let you know, Nick, no matter what hood, everybody got a drunk neighbor. So it's not a stereotype. Everybody got a neighbor who turns up the bottle, so it's okay. It's not a stereotype.
And sometimes it's me.
Yeah. Everybody got a neighbor who,
Neighbor,
somebody.
All right, so look, we're gonna open it up for some Q&A. Here's the thing, we would love to hear from you, and it's open to everybody, but we would love to hear from you. If you have any questions for the two of them or for myself, please feel free to ask. If you are, I hate to give young people this option because I know what's going to happen, but if you are a little nervous or you're a little shy, you don't want to ask the question, you have those pieces of paper in front of you. If you've written something down, please feel free to pass them.
Ain't none of them shy. I see them.
Exactly. I was told to tell y'all that, but I'm like, man, if I was a kid, I'd have been like, bet. But please, if you have any questions, any comments, please raise your hand. Let's make it happen. Don't be scared. It's all good. You want to get the kids first?
Yeah.
So, where's your younger brother TJ now?
Oh, well, he's a grown man, and he lives in Paris, where my uncle used to live. My uncle moved to Paris when he was about 24, and then he stayed in Europe because he couldn't catch a break as a black man in New York during that time. He was harassed by police. He was beat up. He was, given a hard time. So he left and went to Europe to feel a sense of freedom. A lot of our people went to Europe in the 40s, 50s, and 60s so that they could create their art because they didn't feel like they could do it here because it was that difficult during that time. And I would say that my brother was informed by some of those same reasons to go over to Paris, but that's where he lives. But he was here recently to do one of these panels. So he has a daughter now, and she's like flipping through the book, and she gets to read about her dad when he was little.
And he still wears a blue hat just like this in the picture.
Yeah, he does. You could watch him read online. The Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, just to let you know, there's an online program that you can look at, you can watch, and you can see TJ read from the book.
Man, I live in Paris. Chef.
So this isn't a question, it's a comment. Once I feel like history, because you're all so young, but I once heard James Baldwin speak at Rutgers, and it was really a highlight of my life. It was just incredible. But what I want to say now is I had actually forgotten the connection with Dial Press. And somebody who's been leaving out, I don't know if she was his editor or not, but there was a white editor at Dial Press in those days, Phyllis Fogelman. And in those days, there was like nobody black in publishing. Yeah. There was nobody who was black that was writing children's books. I mean, it was terrible. And librarians were actually a very activist group in trying to change the picture. But Phyllis Fogelman was one of the first, if not the first, children's book editors who was so persistent in seeking out and publishing black writers. She published The Dillons, was another one of her, I don't know if anyone knows them anymore. But so I don't know if she was even his editor, but she still deserves a lot of, I think she should be remembered for what she had done. Okay.
We got it on the books now. You got it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. Okay.
You're next.
All right. Lawrence Jackson, I wanted to know two things. I noticed that you said your uncle spent a lot of time in France, and your brother is still over there too. What is it about the French culture, black culture in France, that connects? And do you ever talk about it, or can you share some stories about it?
Well, like I said, during the 40s, 50s, and 60s, black entertainers, black writers, black painters, impressionist artists went to France to be able to create. There was an environment there that was considered more conducive for black people to be able to be who they fully were. The French gave that space. It does not mean that France does not suffer from its own brand of racism, that, you know, it was some sort of utopia or place where there was no type of negative treatment. But for African Americans in particular, some of you may have heard of Josephine Baker. She was a dancer and performer. She went over to Paris and became a very successful performance artist there. And if you go to France today, if you go to Paris today, there's a Black in Paris tour, Blacks in Paris tour, that gives you a historical tour of Black Paris and all of the different artists, Langston Hughes, Josephine Baker, Nina Simone, my uncle, Buford Delaney, who is a famous impressionist painter, who the book is dedicated to, lived in Paris. So there is, first of all, just to let you know, Paris is the place where hip hop is practiced in its truest form from when it was birthed back in the late 70s, early 80s. Over in Paris, hip hop is considered an art form where people practice DJing, breakdancing, graffiti art. I mean, they have spaces in Paris dedicated that we don't have here to hip hop artists, and they're hip hop artists from back in the 80s who go over there and tour and are considered legends and are still appreciated. So there's something about Black American art, music, culture that people in France and Europe in general just have a very high respect for, that for some reason this country has yet to catch up to.
I also think if you dig a little bit on the history of Paris in particular, if you dig a little bit, like not a little bit, if you dig a lot and you go back like way back, there was a huge like Paris has a serious African history that has been washed away. So I also think some of it is just about like ancestral energy. Right? Like you get there, you're like, yo, I don't know what it is about Paris, but I've been here. I know this. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Because we were there for a very long time, and you would never know now because it's Paris, right? But there was a huge African footprint.
And they're back.
And
the
they're back.
Africans are back.
So check that out too.
All right, one more question for the sister. Do you have any family members currently that are inspired by James Baldwin's writing that can speak to the culture nowadays, like a more modernized version of his art?
I can't say. I would say that we have artists in the family. I'm an author. I wrote a book called Dining While Black that talks about the history of Black people and eating out, and how the Greensboro sit-ins and the Green Book, which was a movie recently made, but the Real Green Book, which was a guide that Black people had to carry with them to know what restaurants and hotels and stuff were safe to eat at. I wrote that just as a testament to my upbringing, because I grew up eating out a lot. I grew up eating at a lot of restaurants, and I wanted to write about the history and when we could not eat out. But in terms of specifically writing to that, not yet. We haven't produced anyone yet in the family. We have photographers, filmmakers, other people who are artists, but we really have benefited greatly. The job isn't over, but the type of life that my brothers, my cousins are able to enjoy because of my uncle's sacrifice means that we're open to do art around other subjects. You understand, just stuff that brings us joy. Whereas he had to be sort of that witness, that foot soldier, to sacrifice so that we could have what we have now. So, yeah.
Okay,
sorry, this young man had a question. Yeah, we'll get you, but he did. Go ahead.
My bad.
No, you good.
Does James Baldwin, did he have any obvious presence in D.C. or any inspiration in D.C.? Like, just for example.
Did he have any residences here? Or any inspiration?
No, actually, the family is based here now. Yeah, my family is based in D.C. now. My grandmother, his mother, is from the DMV. So she's from the Eastern Shore of Maryland. I know y'all don't consider that the DMV, but no.
I don't know.
But we have family in Baltimore, we have family in D.C., and we have family in Virginia, because my grandmother drew us to this area of the country because of her roots, because a lot of people who are from the Eastern Shore of Maryland moved to Baltimore and moved to DC and Virginia, because that was considered moving from the country. So, but that's the only roots that he has, besides speaking of going to the White House to address Bobby Kennedy, who was then the Attorney General, John F. Kennedy's brother. John F. Kennedy's younger brother, Bobby Kennedy, was the Attorney General at the time, and my uncle, along with Lorraine Hansberry the activist from Jamaica, the singer, Harry Belafonte, Lorraine Hansberry, who's another playwright, and they all met with him to talk about the civil rights movement and the importance of making a stand. So he has a connection to DC in that way, but other than that,
well, he also spent some time here at Howard University, putting on plays. So he has a real strong.
Yeah.
He spent a fair amount of time here, and when he first came back, I think from France, being called back by the civil rights movement, I think the first place he came was Washington, D.C., where he met with Dr. Kenneth Clark, I believe. And that was a major catalyst for him to come back more permanently during that period.
And I would love for y'all, young folks, young brothers and sisters, do a little research on D.C. and about, look, all of Baldwin's contemporaries had to come through here.
Yeah,
Washington, D.C., do some research on the corner of 14th and U. And figure out what that corner meant, why it's such an important corner, how the Harlem Renaissance doesn't get to be the Harlem Renaissance if it wasn't for this city before they all moved up there.
Exactly.
Right? Like we have a lot to be proud of at this time.
Absolutely, Black Broadway.
Absolutely.
So I have a comment and a question. My comment is that my mother, Dolores Zimmerman, her sister, Mary Catherine Zimmerman, went to Paris with your uncle.
Oh, wow.
And my high school best friend, Kabila Shabazz, called him Uncle Jimmy.
Oh, yeah,
Malcolm's
daughters.
And so my question is, and I am not your Negro, even though this is much different, the children's book is much different from that. I think that some of the messages are the same.
Absolutely.
And I am not your Negro, James Baldwin was not very optimistic about the future of African Americans in the United States. And how do you feel that his words have played out now? How have they held up as far as, I felt like he was prophetic in that movie in saying things that
Well, he was prophetic, period.
Yeah, but he
Yeah.
said so many things that you could have just dropped them into the news today.
Absolutely.
What is your opinion of his prospects for African Americans in this country? Thank you.
I think he was spot on. It's quite frankly, I think that, in the way that he talked about sort of, even in the clip that we watched, in the way that he talked about, well, are the schools any different? Are they better or worse? And how he's like, oh, it's worse. Like, it's gotten worse, Look, I try to be an optimist, but the truth of the matter is that the same things that he was challenging and picking apart are the same things we're still talking about, right? No, I can't call, like I used to say, no, I may not be able to say that the American educational system is racist, but I can say that my schools don't have books. I can say that there are 40 kids in my classroom. I can say these things, and then I can infer that clearly when I go across the bridge to Alexandria, the school don't look like that, right? And so I think that the things that he was trying to say and that he did say back then are the exact arguments that we're still having today. The one thing I'll always give him credit for that I love most about him, though, is that he always looked at the people who were implementing the oppression in this country, white America. He always looked at them as brothers and sisters. So he never dehumanized them, right? He never, even though they've dehumanized us, he never dehumanized them. And instead he said, look, I pity you, right? And letter to my nephew, he's telling his nephew to have grace upon them, even though his life is in jeopardy. And I think I try to walk in a world, I try to live in a world, or at least internally, where I can do the same thing.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. One more question, and it's important if you can, whoever is in charge to screen that film, I Am Not Your Negro, if they have not already seen it. If you need to contact me to get licensing, but it's important that the young people see that movie if they want to learn more about James Baldwin and why he is so important today.
I just want to ask a question. As a mother of a 5-year-old, what type of advice would you offer a mother who has her son currently in speech therapy to correct some of our native language? Like, what advice would you offer someone?
Okay, that's interesting because we were just talking about that. So when I was growing up, and it's affectionately called code switching. It's similar to people who grow up in bilingual homes where they speak Spanish amongst their family, and then when they're in school or when they're in public spaces, they are speaking standard American English. So when I was growing up, we code switch. We switched between languages, and it was very clear that when we were in certain social settings, that we were to speak a certain way, and then we could switch up, and when we were relax when we were amongst family and friends, and speak how we speak, our own English, Black English. And to me, your child is young. If you were speaking about your child or you were just reading a question, it's going to come. Because like my niece now, I tease my brother because her mother's Italian. So I said, oh, and she lives in Paris. And so they speak, she's from Naples. So in southern Italy, they speak Italian, and then they speak a dialect it's called Napolitano. They speak a Naples dialect. So it's like their broken, it's their broken English. So I said, oh, my niece is gonna speak Ebonics, she's gonna speak French, she's gonna speak Italian, and she's gonna speak dialect. Like, because when I talk to her, I'd be like, what's up, baby girl, how you doing? Da-da-da. I'm gonna come and braid your hair, da-da. And I'm like, she's looking at me, I'm like, yeah, you're gonna learn how to speak how auntie speak, okay? You're gonna have to put the French to the side and all that other stuff. You're gonna understand what I'm saying when I'm shouting at you. And so, so as they grow, as long as you are there to guide them. Because like I remember we would come in the house and we would say, yeah, we just walked into the store. My mother said, you did what? Walked it? No, you walked to the store. You don't correct them, because they're going to say, oh, she thinks she thinks she all that. She thinks she's, but you don't have to correct them. But when my mother when we would come into the house and bring in the street language in the house, she would correct us. And she would say, no, you say it this way. And we would learn how to say it right and then go back outside.
I would offer one thing to keep in mind, though, and I think this is something that because I think about this an awful lot. One thing to keep in mind is that we have to be very careful about the way we talk about our language.
Right.
And the reason why is because, first of all, to my honest opinion is that language that so many of us are trying to work out of our young people is one of the most important things we have.
Absolutely.
The reason why is because language, every anthropologist in the world will tell you that language is the cornerstone of culture.
Absolutely.
The cornerstone, right?
Absolutely.
So to wipe that language away is to dismiss a part of the culture that people have died for us to exist in. And so even though I know we have to learn the standard,
right,
it's important that we know that the standard does not necessarily
mean better
correct
or better.
Correct. Our English ain't broken.
It's not broken.
It's different.
Right.
It's ours.
Right.
And so I think make sure that when you're teaching the standard
right.
in the colloquial, that you talk about it
right.
as a standard.
Dirt and a colloquial, and they're equal. Right, exactly, and they're equal. Absolutely. Sorry, that was the last question. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, brother. I'm sorry, man. It ain't blame the library contract.
Sorry.
I want to thank you guys. Nicholas, thank you. Aisha, thank you. Jason, thank you. And I mentioned earlier that all of you are getting a copy of Little Man, thanks to an open book. And my colleague Darren, come on out, from our Arthur P. I'll let you introduce.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Darren Jones. I'm a reference librarian here at the Library of Congress, but I'm also the program director for the Daniel A.P. Murray African American Culture Association of the Library of Congress. Mr. Murray was a black man who worked here many years ago and helped to create this building here. I grew up, first of all, I'm a graduate of Cardozo Senior High School.
Right.
So I'm a DC Public High School graduate, class of 1978.
All right.
So 40 years as of last June, I graduated from Cardozo. I was not familiar with this book. I've read James Baldwin all my life, but I did not know that he had written a children's book. So I found out about the book, and the Daniel Murray Association wants to donate a copy of the book to the libraries of the two schools that are here today. So if someone wants to come up from Braun Brown College Prep High School and someone from Theodore Roosevelt High School, I will give you a copy of the book. Roosevelt? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you all for being here today.
Thank you.
All right, and finally, we do have some event surveys. If you would take a chance to complete them and leave them for us to let us know what you liked about today, what you'd love to see the library do more of, we would really appreciate it. I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for the great questions. And our conversation was terrific. Thanks, guys.
Wonderful. Thank you.